Welcome to Talk HR UK. I'm Simon Geere from the Alexander Lloyd HR Recruitment team, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6. I'm not walking my dog today outside because the weather is so bad, neither of us could face it. So tucked up warm inside, and today you're going to be enjoying the podcast I've recorded recently with Carla Henson, who is the Senior Manager of Business Partnering and Employee Experience at Toyota GB. Now, I've known Carla on and off about 10 years, I think, and she's worked with Toyota for nearly 14 years now in various both operational and now HR roles. And more recently, she's moved into a role that has a real weighting towards employee experience, which I know is a really hot topic in HR at the moment and something that interests me personally a lot. So Carla and I agreed to put something down on video and audio to discuss this. I hope you'll find it useful. Anyway, I will catch up with you at the other end of the podcast. Please enjoy. Speak to you soon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk HR UK. This is Season 2, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Carla Henson from Toyota. So welcome aboard, Carla. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I'm glad we're recording this today and not yesterday. It's a bit calmer out there. It's not blisteringly hot. So Absolutely. Hopefully a calm moment. So straight over to you, Carla. I mean, tell us a little bit about your current role at Toyota and a bit about your background there, first of all, please.
Yeah, sure. So this year, I think in November, I'll be there 14 years, which is crazy. It doesn't feel like 14 years. I joined way back in the customer services division, actually, joining the technical team. And Toyota has a real culture of enabling people to move around the business and gain that breadth of experience. So I moved into the HR team a couple of years later and have evolved then and moved within the HR team to my current role, which is a bit of a mouthful: Senior Manager, Business Partner and Employee Experience. So that's my current role. In my role, I'm responsible for a sort of team of business partners who partner very closely with the business. And also a wider team, which is really about focusing on that employee experience and everything HR related. So we're a fully generalist team. So we cover all areas and all remits. So I've been in my current role 2.5 years.
Right, thanks. And that was, I suppose, really the reason we decided to collaborate on this today, really, was your slight, I'd not say sideways shift, but you've bolted on employee experience as a really big key part of your role. And I know the organisation has invested a lot of time and effort in it. And that's something is quite high profile now in the HR community. And I thought it would be great to share this with our audience and hear about your journey, really. So I suppose starting off, what is employee experience? What does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, and as you say, it's not a term that we used to use. We used to talk much more about employee engagement. And we've been on an employee engagement journey for a number of years at Toyota. But sort of 2-3 years ago, we started to look at the employee experience, and we were really sort of recognising that in the business, we talk so much about customer experience, and it's absolutely fundamental. And we started to recognise that actually it's really important to think about the employee experience. It's not just about engagement, it's much wider than that. So for me, employee experience is really looking at every element of that employee's journey within a company and sort of fundamentally how that makes you feel at each element. So where engagement was much more sort of about, we were talking about kind of going the extra mile. It's really about breaking it much into each element and understanding kind of how as a company are we approaching something, from joining a new role to an induction to how they're developed, how you're getting supported through your manager, and thinking about each of those touch points and the experience that employees are receiving within each of those touch points. So yeah, that's probably sort of how it's evolved and really what experience means for me and us at Toyota.
Excellent. Because as you say, I mean, employee engagement's been around a long time. Everyone's, pretty comfortable with that discretionary effort concept. But as you say, the whole concept of experience is really different and really interesting. So how did this get started? What made you decide to tackle the concept at Toyota?
Yeah. So I think for us, it was, as I mentioned, we've been sort of focusing on engagement, and that's resulted in a top 100 best company ranking for a number of years. So we've now been a 3-star company, which is world-class levels of engagement for 5 years. So during that, we were really looking at the data that came out of the surveys each year, and we realised that the real fundamental point was around consistency. So what we could see is we were making great progress as a company, but there were still really big levels of inconsistency in sort of pockets of areas and some very different experiences that employees were talking about and were very aware of that might be different in other areas. So we realised that we really need to think about how we get better consistency and continue to kind of make that next level step change. So once you've kind of got to that level of engagement, making that step change is quite difficult, and it's about sort of thinking about how we do that and really how we support our employees in the right way to perform at their best. So we were sort of really also then looked at sort of as an HR team, we looked at ourselves and thought about how do we work at the different touch points with our business at the moment. And as an HR team, sort of looking back for 3-4 years, I think the business was to us as very supportive, very comprehensive support. But the way that we were operating and the experiences and the frameworks we had in place weren't really truly reflecting our culture. So when people talk about Toyota GB, they talk about very sort of family friendly feel. It's very people oriented. It's all about the relationships and the working relationships that we have. But we realised that actually the way that we sort of operated was quite corporate. It was kind of quite grey in lots of ways, or there was lots of information written in quite a corporate style. And when we sort of looked at that, we thought, you know what, it's brilliant that we've got all of these great ways of communicating, but they're not quite landing how we would hope that they're landing. And so the starting point for us really was looking into our sort of employer value proposition and our brand about what is the experience that we're trying to create as an HR team, and how do we support our managers to deliver that experience. And that really needed to kind of be from that point of view of the frameworks and how we were communicating with our managers and with our people. So that was really our starting point, was about that sort of next level on from engagement, and that realization that actually there was a slight disconnect in how we were working versus how our employees sort of were experiencing the company.
It's really interesting. I think I mentioned this to you before, but any business has to stand back and look at its voice almost, and how you communicate both externally with third parties or potential employees or whatever it is, and obviously more importantly internally. And it's such a key thing, and you can have all the fun stuff in the world, but the way you talk to people is key, isn't it? And plays a big part in this.
And I think what we saw is the way we spoke to people in person was quite different to our written communications, or our kind of wider employee communications were really different in style to how we interacted on a day-to-day basis, which is where, as you say, so it really made us realise there was that disconnect. And you do to a more corporate style, it does give you a different feeling, and you do react to things in a different way. So yeah,
definitely. It's all the fun is kind of vacuumed out. I find once you start typing, you suddenly become far more, sort of Downton Abbey, and it's strange, isn't it? But
yeah, absolutely.
So you recognise, that's a great place to start in terms of the initial challenges. I mean, how did you? Having recognised you wanted to do this, how did you get it moving? What were the challenges from the business? How long has it taken to get from, I suppose, the concept to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we probably started around 2.5 years ago when I sort of moved into this role, and we started by engaging with a employer branding agency, and they worked with us. So we held interviews with our senior stakeholders, and we talked to them about, what does the brand mean for you? What do our people represent, and how do we work together? So we really pulled together all of their feedback, and they sort of really then had a bit of an audit of our processes. So they looked at our new starter paperwork, for example, and they reflected it back to us once they've looked at it. And they had lots of experience of working with other companies that had fantastic employee brands. So we could really sort of contrast the two. And what that highlighted is, the stakeholder feedback about, how they viewed our company, and the kind of things that, people were saying is, how would you describe this company? Something if you're sitting in the pub with someone, how would you describe Toyota GB? And that versus the way that we were kind of communicating was quite different. So what they developed from that was a brand called Together for Better. So this is now our kind of slogan that we use, which from a people and planning division, we all use a Together for Better. And that was really our tagline that we all brought into as a business, which is about kind of how we describe our people, how we work together, our values, and how we're better together. So that was a sort of starting point. And then the second point was to really look at our tone of voice. So they showed some of our communications back to us. And,
Right.
you know, when you look at them through somebody else's eyes, you realise the differences that we needed. And they were very formal and detailed, as I've mentioned. So they developed for us a new tone of voice suggestions. So really sort of developing something much more engaging, transparent, easy to read communication style. So we trained up the HR team and also some other people in the business who also communicate with people regularly through internal communications to become almost sort of happy, comfortable with that new tone of voice. And we've got someone in our team who's kind of our sort of ambassador for this, and he'll remind us really nicely when we might be going a bit, you know, back to that corporate style, because it takes a while to get used to a different way of writing.
Of course.
So that was a sort of process that we went through. And then what we did is we then started to write down, what does employee experience look like for us? So we've mapped that into different segments. So for example, attracting the best is a sort of when you start to join us, so it's a recruitment experience, and setting up for success when you join us. So we mapped those. And then what we wrote down against each of those is, what is the experience we want to deliver through that particular segment? And we wrote that down, and then we engaged with a number of stakeholders through the business. We sent out surveys and said, what do you think? Does this reflect how you would want to be treated and how you would want to feel within this particular experience? And we got their feedback, and we tweaked those paragraphs to kind of make it feel really right for us. And then we also asked them to sort of give us a rating against each one. So that we said, actually, so, you know, when you first joined Toyota and you were sort of working in that recruitment process, give us a score out of 10 about, you know, how much did we match up to this experience? So we got them some really good data from it to understand, you know, what they wanted the experience to be and what we were delivering currently.
It's a really good idea, and it's a bit frightening, I imagine, because as you say, you've got a mirror held up to what you thought was a nice, robust process, and is actually probably alienating. Sometimes it's the case, isn't it? It turns people off.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so important, because we didn't want it to feel like an HR thing. You know, it could have felt like some sort of paragraphs that we talk about that feel, again, quite disconnected. So it's really important that people felt that they could buy into it, and also they could understand, you know, when I'm applying for a role internally, this is how it's going to work for me, and this is how it's going to feel. And if it doesn't, then I've got a channel to tell people that this isn't how it's feeling, and we can just continue to listen to that. So we encourage people still to give us feedback about it. So it's the thing that we can kind of hold ourselves to as that framework, really.
I like the fact you've got a champion in the team who translates everything you say. I've got this vision of, you know, lots of people quoting policy, and then there's someone there sort of just with a dictionary, like a cool dictionary, changing all the words. But so you brought, I mean, brilliantly, you brought a lot of stakeholders into the process. At that point, you were, you know, asking them to, you know, to help out and to rate you, give you ratings in certain areas. You've obviously, as you're starting to design the change, it's a bit of change management at the end of the day. How did you get those employees and key stakeholders involved in kind of helping you both design the initiatives and delivering it to the employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So something we did once we got that survey data back is we held some focus groups with people across the business, and we sort of said, you know, you've rated us as, say, a 6 in this area. Tell us what would make it better. So we got some brilliant feedback around the different parts of the employee experience. And we also did a event in our, what we call our street area, which is our communal area. Obviously, when we're in the office, that is a place that we can all gather, and we have our vehicles in the street, and it's a great sort of place to interact. So we held an employee experience event in the street. So once we kind of got all that feedback and we'd honed it and we were comfortable with the experience, we sort of developed these big boards which were talking about the experience at each level, and we invited people down to the street to talk to us about it. And understand it. It was great because we also organised a ice cream van that day, and luckily it was a lovely hot day.
Awesome.
So people were coming down. It actually demonstrated really nicely one of the elements of our journey, which is about celebrating success. So we were saying, you know, this is a great example about how we celebrate each other as people, how we reward you. So yeah, people were kind of walking around the street with an ice cream, chatting to us about the experience, and giving us again some really good feedback about some things that we could think about and their experiences. And also, you know, what I think we were really struck by is lots of people said how brilliant some of their experiences have been, and that is just as valuable actually, because sometimes you don't realise how much people value, and it kind of made us realise what we wanted to continue doing.
Definitely. You need to know what you're doing right. Everyone's very happy to
Yeah.
share what you're doing wrong, but you very rarely get that,
Yeah.
but I did like this.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, that was great to hear, and gave us some great stories as well to talk about when we were communicating this to people.
Excellent. So these were events, and this was, I always approve of ice cream. That's a fantastic idea. But this is involving people with what you're going to deliver, I suppose. Is that right? So gathering all the data, understanding what you're doing well, that you've got plans to improve, and finding out what you didn't don't. So post then, so how did you then launch what you just, how did you design what you wanted to do? What changes did you make? How did you then reintegrate that into the organization?
Yeah, so I think once we'd done that, that was probably sort of the start of our launch and really getting it out there. We then made sure there was a place on our internal intranet where people could engage with it and look at it and understand it regularly. So we did that. And then I think it was really about starting to think about, rolling out the new branding. So we had some new branding and the tone of voice. So it was starting to, in all of the communications that we were sending as an HR team, starting to send those out in that way, so people could start to see instantly the difference, and they did look very different, although there was still sort of had that, they still felt like Twitter communications, but there was that difference. So we started by really starting in those communications, and then we started really looking at the elements of our employee experience where we got the lowest scores. So we really started to break down the feedback that we'd received and thinking about, okay, so if we're going to deliver the experience, let's really innovate this process and change it to deliver that experience. So there was a couple that came out initially around attracting the best and setting you up for success for some lower scores. So we sort of put a project team in those areas to really break those down and think about how we could make them even better.
Excellent. That's what I was going to say. Really, is you've obviously received data on areas to improve.
Yeah.
So if I joined now, if I was hired, talent acquisition, I guess. That's all I've been doing for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
What differences would I see between the pre-employee experience Toyota and what you've created now? What would you think would be the first impressions of the new style that I'd experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's probably a few that I can talk through. So in attracting the best, some of the feedback that we had was, as a new starter, you're receiving this sort of massive chunk of paperwork. We would send out every policy printed out for people to read, and we looked at that and we thought, that is the first impression people are getting from us, is a massive stack of policies that are sort of very black and white. They had been printed in a way that had any branding or anything on them.
Full of fun.
Documents. So in that, we really looked about how can we, we feel there are some core policies that people still need to read, of course, and understand, but we don't need to print those out in that way. We can send them out in a way that is much more interactive and personable. We also really broke down the way that we communicated with people. So we brought in something called Launchpad. You may be familiar with it. It's one-way video interviewing.
Right, I've heard of it.
Yeah, so we brought it in as sort of a first stage screening. And what that really did was it enabled us to ask questions like, can you tell us something that we wouldn't know from your CV? And we've had some brilliant answers to that question. And what that has helped us do is, in that recruitment process, you're starting to get to know them. So when you start communicating with them, you could say, you talked in your video about the fact that you run a regular pub quiz. We'd love to hear more about that. And so you can start interacting with people in much more of a personal way. So what we did is we sort of broke down all of the communications that we were sending in a recruitment process. We totally sort of rebranded and tone of voice those documents to sort of say, let's really talk to them in a personal, engaging, clear way. So we really changed those, and then we kind of thought about the opportunities in those communications to make it personal. So if somebody had told us something, then we remember in that communication that we reference it, and it doesn't feel like that blanket communication. So if, for example, we've made an offer to somebody and they were on holiday, this is a sort of real example, we made an offer and they were sitting on the beach, and in the communications we were then saying, we hope you're having a fantastic holiday and we really look forward to meeting. So just little touches that can make it feel much more personal. So that, I think, is a big change. Something else in that process that was a big change was that we used to have what we call organisation announcements. So when people joined and left Toyota, we would send an email. Carla Henson has joined as of this date into this team, and sort of a list. We looked at that and thought, what kind of experience is that giving? How celebratory is that message, and also how is that giving people that insight into who's joining and start that conversation going. So what we did is we totally changed that announcement, so we now have a very nice sort of branded, it's got photos in it, and we get a statement from people that join in to tell them about us. So they talk about their hobbies and those kind of things, and we also get a really personal statement. If it's an internal move or somebody that's leaving, we get a personal statement from the manager about all the things they've achieved, and some really nice personal touches that they'll talk about the things that they'll miss, the team will miss about them. And I think what that has really done is it gives you that option when someone joins and you see them in the corridor for the first time, you know a bit about them, you can start a conversation, and exactly. That's made a real difference. That's such a contrast, I think, in how we used to operate.
Definitely, and it doesn't cost anything really, does it? As well, that's what I really like about that. I remember reading something online about a similar initiative, and I thought, what a brilliant idea! As you say, as you say, when you first see, particularly in this new environment where we're not meeting people
Absolutely.
as much as we'd like to be, perhaps, you can still engage for the first time digitally, and as you say, reference a holiday or an interest or a book club or. It shows how boring I am. I don't book club straight to that. But very good. Okay. Yeah. So lots of new initiatives coming in, particularly in both onboarding and the other end, but throughout the life cycle, really.
Absolutely. There's another thing that might be interesting around the onboarding. What we've done is we've created experience plans. So when they join as part of the induction, because setting it up for success is a really key element that we wanted to kind of think about, what we do is we've written a kind of a format for an experience plan that the manager then inputs to and thinks about what is that 30, 60, 90-day experience that somebody has joining, either, joining a new team, because it might be an internal move, or joining Toyota, to really think about that and plan it and think about the people they need to speak to, the development that they'll need in those sort of days. And so I think that's made quite a difference as well, because it's taken that angle where before it would have been an induction plan, quite practical. I think thinking of it through the lens of experience and how this will feel and how this will set them up in their role means that often those plans are quite different to what would be kind of classed as a standard induction.
As you say, it's changing that mindset, and that what I was going to ask you that, I suppose. I mean, this is great stuff, and clearly, if you're in HR and you're on that side of the fence, if you like, and thinking it through as an initiative, it's very easy to get very passionate and excited about it. But this is a big change for the business, particularly the line managers, who, as you've said, they're now very involved with this. I mean, if anything, they're almost, you're the custodians of it, but they're delivering the employee experience, aren't they?
Yes,
so what have you done to help them both engage with the initiative and what support have they needed, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the starting point was we've always had the messaging about the importance of consistency. And it was building upon that. And we've also had something called the management deal in place for a number of years. So I think this built upon what was already in place, which is a management deal. And our management deal was around the expectations of the two-way relationship, about how a manager will work with somebody and how somebody then needs to work with their manager in that collaborative way. So I think the way that we focus this is about the kind of the next step on the management deal process, around how you as a manager think about what you're already doing really fantastically in your teams, but how you think about the experience. And we also identified where managers needed some more support. So some of the feedback we got in the survey is around what we call our fair deal, which is around our salary bonus sort of processes. Right. And what we realised is we weren't really equipping managers with the right information to have good conversations about performance and the resulting pay impact. So what we did is we developed booklets. So we developed a booklet for sort of employees to understand and be much more clear and transparent. But then we developed a manager-only booklet, which was called Equipping You to Have Conversations About Performance and Reward. So we're thinking about how we can really equip our managers with, how to have a great conversation, thinking about experience. So you're not just delivering a message, but making sure that they sort of felt supported in the background. We're also currently developing what we're calling a kind of management pack. And this management pack is really articulating each element of the experience and how they as a manager can deliver that experience, and lots of sort of signposting to things that will help them. So whether it's frameworks, policies, information, best practice. So it's quite comprehensive. It's taken quite a while for us to kind of pull together. And we're hoping that's going to be really useful for managers, again, to sort of really help them engage with the experience in more detail, but also have at their fingertips all that information that we have in lots of different pockets at the moment. But often I think it's about sort of understanding the messaging can really help managers sort of deliver the right things in their teams and have great conversations. We've always been about the fundamental thing around experience is having really great conversations, and I think that's so true, you know, for us as a business. I know for so many businesses it's about the discussions that you have. So we've done a lot with our managers also around equipping them to have really good conversations. We've got something called Total Talks, which gives them lots of skills around having those conversations. So yeah, I think quite a comprehensive range of support through sort of development, through booklets, through discussions with managers. But I think it's ongoing as well. You know, it's something we're continuing to build on and understand how we can support our managers even more.
That sounds great. And in fairness, it's hardly something people were likely to push back on, because it's a positive thing. There's no downside to this, is there? Everyone having a better time at work and a more positive experience at the end of the day. Yeah. So I guess you haven't had to sell it. And the impression I'm also getting, and obviously we've known each other a long time, Carla, is that you've always been pretty good at this anyway as a business. I don't think you were starting from a place of dire negativity and poor experience, perhaps, but it's still good that you've taken that initiative and pushed the envelope a little further, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you're right. I think because we've been on this journey for a number of years, we weren't starting from scratch here, but it was about, I think, a new language that we were using. But I think it is a language that people identify with, as I mentioned, about the customer experience. It's people, you know, people are already aware of that, and it's kind of translating that into the employee world, I guess. But yeah, you're right. You know, I think through the journey that we've been on, we've already got really capable, experienced managers. So it's really just about those sort of tweaks and frameworks to just support them even further to be able to deliver that within their teams.
Excellent. So final question really from me, for the benefit of our watchers and listeners, always makes me laugh when I say that. How do you think it's going, you know, genuinely? Because it's obviously a big change. There's been a lot of planning, a lot to deliver. I kind of want to know, you know, what are you really pleased with? What went well? Maybe what would you do differently next time? You know, what didn't go so well? How is it so far?
So I think, it's gone really well. It's been fantastic. I think it's given us that consistent language and checkpoint of everything we do. So, you know, as a team, we'll often sort of talk about something, and then it's sort of that, what is the experience that's being delivered here? So it becomes that kind of check all the time. I think the fact that we've got so much more consistent branding and tone of voice has made a huge difference to what we do. And I think we've seen some great results in our Best Companies results this year. So where before I talked about the inconsistency, this year every single division has been rated as a 3-star. So we've, you know, for the first year we've got that real consistency within our business of that sort of world-class engagement. So I think that's really been sort of testament to some of this work, but also the great work that our managers have done. And we've got 85% of our managers that are now sort of star rated. So through Best Companies, they get a star rating. So again, that sort of shows how the managers have really sort of taken it on and have delivered that to their teams. So yeah, I think in terms of your question about what we do differently, I think it's overall, I think it's been really positive, and it's absolutely the right step for us. I think sometimes through personalisation it can take longer, and it's getting the balance right around personalising and making it feel, you know, the right way, but not sort of bogging yourself down too much in your processes, because actually experience is also important, that it still keeps really efficient and you're still communicating in a timely manner. So that, I think, has been a balance. And I think, you know, it's just about continuing that, you know, continuity about that kind of tone of voice. That's taken a while for us to kind of really get on top of, but I think we're there now. There's that breadth of experience in the team, and we've all really embraced it. So yeah, I think overall it's been really successful, but I think there's also lots still that we can continue to focus on, and different elements of the journey that we can now move on to think about the experience in there. We're sort of focused on the ones that had the lowest scores initially, and now it's about continuing to look at the other elements and how we can make that even better.
Oh, definitely. Well said. And as you say, it's going to keep evolving. There's going to be new, changes to business, changes to ways of working, changes to ways of onboarding, all this. Every time anything happens, I guess you're just going to have to stand back and think, as you say, what's the experience for the person on the business end of this, and how could it be better? And that's probably a great way to think in general anyway, really.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's all, your work's never finished in this way, is it? As we evolve, and we're evolving a lot as a company, and thinking about also how we continue to get the best talent in the market. It's really important that we keep looking at this and keep evolving and keeping at the forefront. So yeah, totally agree.
Excellent. Well, hey, look, thanks so much for giving up so much of your time. I know we've been sort of talking about this on and off for a few months, and it's always hard to get space in the diary, but thank you so much for giving us an insight into what you've done at Toyota in terms of employee experience. And it sounds really positive. I think people will really enjoy listening to this, hearing about what you've done. I'm assuming if there's anyone here that's got anyone listening perhaps or watching who's got questions, are you happy for them to reach out perhaps via LinkedIn and just connect?
Yeah, that would be great. It'd be great to hear from them. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed being part of this, so thank you.
Pleasure. No, my pleasure. Thanks a lot for your time, and obviously we'll talk again soon. Cheers,
Great,
Carla.
thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks for listening or watching Season 2, Episode 6 of Talk HR UK. And most importantly, thanks to Carla Henson from Toyota GB, who gave up her valuable time to talk to us all about how she's helped push the employee experience agenda at Toyota GB. All the other Talk HR UK episodes, both seasons, are available on our Alexander Lloyd YouTube channel, or audio only on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. The list is endless. You can find us. Please do like and share the podcasts and subscribe on the platform that you enjoy in order to receive notifications about new episodes. And it'd be great if you can leave us a review. As always, I'm Simon Geere. Thanks a lot for watching or listening, and I'll see you next time on Talk HR UK. Many thanks.